ban which saw the closure of 2,500 outlets. The Post Office didn't say what a politically acceptable number of outlets might be, but said they're pleased numbers have remained stable in recent years. The government has declined to comment. Now, Downing Street says it still has complete confidence in Britain's Trident nuclear programme, despite a missile misfiring and crashing into the ocean from the nuclear submarine HMS Vanguard. And it's the second time a test has failed, the government unable to say when the last successful test took place. The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, was on board when the £17 million misfire took place. The Ministry of Defence saying it's unusual, but Trident is still safe, secure and effective. Leicestershire Police confirmed this afternoon the missing 2-year-old's name, the little boy who fell into the River Soar on Sunday. He's called Zylo Maroziva. In a statement released today, the toddler's family described him as a cheeky, funny boy who's a bundle of joy. They've also thanked members of the community for their ongoing support in the search for Zylo. And specialist police divers are continuing their search today in the Elston Meadows area of Leicester, despite difficult conditions caused by recent heavy rainfall. The WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, will have to wait for a decision on his appeal hearing that could see him spending the rest of his life in a US prison if fails. Earlier, protesters were gathering outside the Royal Courts of Justice, where his lawyers have been presenting his case. It's over an alleged conspiracy to publish leaked documents relating to the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. Some of those gathered outside the court spoke about their hopes for Julian Assange.
I hope that he gets a chance to have an appeal, because this court hearing is only, I hope for him to become free immediately. He's only in prison because of his publications of torture and war crimes.
Yeah, it's really, really important. It's probably one of the most important decisions about free speech a court's going to ever make. Definitely the case of the century for Julian Assange.
I'd love him to be released, but I don't think it will happen. But it's basically the most important thing.
Assange supporters outside the High Court today in London. Now, as you were hearing from Michelle, a couple in Lancashire have been revealed as the lucky winners of the first UK Euromillions jackpot of 2024. They have won a life-changing amount, £61 million, and yes, they've decided to go public. Richard and Debbie Nuttall won a share of a £123 million jackpot prize from the end of last month's draw. The other winning ticket apparently was bought in Spain. For the very latest stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks very much for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. There is lots I want to discuss with you tonight, but I cannot help reflect on that last story there about the lottery win. Can someone please enlighten me why on earth anybody would choose to go public with a huge lottery win like that, £60-odd million? Why? What do you think would become of that? I'll be sitting there thinking I'm going to become a target, and my kid's going to become a target. You're going to have begging letters from here to kingdom come all day, every day, I imagine. What do you gain? That would be the last thing I would want anyone to know about me if I'd won the lottery. I haven't, by the way. Don't worry about that. I haven't. But would you really go public if you'd won that amount of money? Tell me. Do enlighten me as to the mindset of sharing that amount of cash with the world. Anyway, alongside me, the Conservative peer in the House of Lords and a former MEP, Jacqueline Foster, and a new face to Dewbs & Co. journalist and commentator, Mike Buckley. Good evening to both of you. Jacqueline, would you go public if you won the lottery?
No.
Good, sensible woman, would you?
No, I wouldn't, no.
If you would, please get in touch with me, because I'm absolutely fascinated to know what would motivate that mindset to put yourself out there like that, literally just to say, I'm really rich. I don't get it. Tell me what I'm missing. Anyway, look, you can get in touch with me with that and lots more to come. All the usual ways, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet me, X me at gbnews. But of course, I must kick off tonight with politics, because it is a big night in Westminster. Why? Because of the situation when it comes to the voting on whether or not there should be be a ceasefire or a pause or whatever over in Gaza. Let's cross live to our political editor, Christopher Herp, to bring us up to speed with all the very latest. Christopher, good evening to you. First and foremost, can you explain to the viewers what exactly is happening?
Yes, here in House of Commons there's been a big debate planned on an SNP motion which was to call for an immediate ceasefire and condemn the collective punishment of Palestinians. Now, in convention, the government can amend that because it's an opposition day debate. And normally, the other opposition party, in this sense, the Labour Party, can't get involved. But the Speaker of the House of Commons ruled at lunchtime that a third motion, tabled by Labour, can stand and will be debated, and that allows many Labour MPs concerned about Gaza wanting to go further than the government's position to vote for the Labour motion, not for the SNP motion, because of course this is an election year, Michelle, and the SNP's motion would have caused several front benchers from Keir Starmer's team to resign had they supported the SNP motion. So it's basically politics about what's happening in Gaza, the Israel response there to the Hamas attacks from October the 7th. That's what's happening, and that's why outside here you'll see images, of course, of several hundred pro-Palestinian demonstrators chanting about the issue of the attacks on Gaza and from the Israelis, and that's why it's a big issue. I should say, just while I'm on air to you, Penny Mordaunt is making a statement in the House of Commons. She's a leader of the House of Commons, and when I can get the base of what she said there, I'll come back to you, because there was a big debate here about why Lindsay Hoyle, who's an independent Speaker of the House of Commons, why has he effectively changed the rules of debate midway through this Parliament. It's like a referee in football changing the rules at half-time on offside. It's a problem. The Tories are unhappy, so is the SNP, but Labour are happy tonight because, of course, their MPs won't have to vote for a position which wasn't a party position.
I'm going to let you go in a second and listen to Penny, but before I do, there's been suggestions that actually the reason Sir Lindsay Hoyle changed his position on this and broke convention essentially was because pressure had been put onto him by the Labour Party. Is there any truth in that, do you think?
Yeah. Well, what happened after PMQs today, Michelle, the Speaker went for a meeting behind the Speaker's chair. We understand that Keir Starmer was there, the Labour Chief Whip was there. I'm told by Tory MPs that no one else was there. The Speaker then came out with his new position, which ripped up the rules, which changed the rules established in 1979 and prompted a letter from the Clerk of the House of Commons, Tom Goldsmith. So the rules were changed. Now, Tory MPs or others are wondering why that happened. What will happen later this year when this place breaks up for the election is a new Speaker is sworn in after that. Now, there are claims by at least 2 Tory MPs to me that pressure was put on Lindsay Hoyle that unless you allow this amendment to take place, we won't support you being Speaker for another 5 years. Those claims are dismissed as utter nonsense by the Labour Party and absolute nonsense by friends of Lindsay Hoyle, who've made very clear he felt that the rules had to be changed to allow all MPs to vote for one outcome rather than have a kind of political difficulties for one party. So I wanted to make clear that, and also that he's also concerned about the impact on MPs back where they live in their constituencies, and they feel that he wanted to give them an option, a third option to vote for. But he's changed the rules in Parliament, and that's really annoyed 2 of the big teams here, the SNP and the Tories, and that's why there's cries of foul play.
And just remind us, what time now? Because these votes were originally scheduled for about 5 o'clock. Obviously, that's been pushed back. So what kind of time are we expecting that now?
7.
That's right. OK, the first votes, I think, on the Labour motion will be after 7 o'clock. Then the SNP motion, and finally the government motion after that. So we'll see 3 big votes happening through, I think, Nigel Farage's show, 7 till 8, and we'll bring the news as soon as they happen to our viewers and listeners at GB News.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for that, Christopher Herp. Now, Jacqueline, there's lots of strands that I want to unpick on this about which way people should be voting. I want to look at all the different amendments. I want to ask whether or not it's going to make a blind bit of difference, and I want to talk about the protests. And we'll come live to those protests shortly because our very own Patrick Christie's, he's actually there on the ground. So I'll come to that bit in a second. But this was actually, it had the potential today, didn't it, to really be quite politically divisive. There's a lot of suggestions as to why the SNP have come up with this motion. Was it all intended to kind of fragment the Labour Party and cause political problems? But all of that, anyway, has been seen off now because essentially there's those 3 separate votes. Now, where are you on this? Because a lot of people are saying that the government should be the ones that are calling for an immediate ceasefire. And, of course, they are not. They're calling for an immediate humanitarian pause as part of moves towards a permanent, sustainable ceasefire. Is that the right approach?
Absolutely. The thing is, we've known the SNP position really since the outset, because the First Minister of Scotland made it clear that he was demanding a ceasefire, and this is going back weeks ago. I think what's astonishing here, and I've always been a bit of a fan of the Speaker, actually, even though I come from a different party, that this has actually happened. I think it's very disappointing. I think it's very disturbing, because these 3 amendments are actually all quite different. Their content is quite different. Where I'm also not at all happy is I have seen, and not just me, over the last week or so, actually the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer, start softening and changing his position. Now, we know that we've had some Labour MPs and we've had some Conservative MPs, and they've been virtually barricaded into their offices in their constituencies, so they've been put in a very difficult position. But at the end of the day, if you lead a party and you want to be the leader of this country or a Prime Minister, you cannot kowtow to those who shout loudest. So I wouldn't support either SNP or the Labour amendment at all. I think the government's got this right, and I would very much support it. And I'm very, very disappointed about what's happened with the protocols in the House of Commons.
Well, before I bring you in, Mike, actually, let's play, just for anyone that's not brought themselves up to speed yet. So let's first of all listen to Stephen Flynn, SNP, speaking about his amendment, actually, because that's, of course, it's Opposition Day, SNP. So it's those guys that have actually kicked all of this off, so to speak. Let's listen.
Mr Speaker, tonight this House will have the opportunity to join with the majority of the international community and say that enough is enough, that the killing in Gaza must stop and that the hostages must be released. And the best way to do that is to send a clear and united message that we back an immediate ceasefire. Surely all of us, irrespective of our political allegiance, can agree on that very issue.
Well, of course, it won't surprise you, of course, to know that Rishi Sunak immediately responded to that. Let's listen.
Of course we want to see the fighting in Gaza end as soon as possible. But he talks about the UN resolution, but just calling for an immediate full ceasefire now, which collapses back into fighting within days or weeks, is not in anyone's interest, Mr. Speaker. We must work towards a permanent ceasefire, and that's why the right approach is the approach that we've set out and the United States have set out in their resolution, which is for an immediate humanitarian pause to get hostages out and aid in.
Now, I want to bring in Mike, but just before I do, I think it's only fair, actually, we've been speaking about Sir Lindsay Hoyle. Let's listen to him and what he had to say before I do that.
I have therefore decided to select the amendments both in the name of the Prime Minister and in the name of the Leader of the Opposition. Because the operation of Standing Order number 31 will prevent another amendment from being moved after the government has moved its amendment.
So there we are, 3 votes. He explains why. Mike, where are you on all this?
I mean, there's something unpleasant about this spat in the House of Commons when we're talking about Gaza, which, to be fair, any vote in the House of Commons is not going to affect. The Israeli government and Hamas are not going to sit there and think, oh, there's been a vote in the House of Commons, let's all down tools or let's carry on fighting. You know, and instead of the main topic being the deaths on both sides, you know, the 30,000 deaths in Gaza and the over 1,000 deaths in Israel last October, grief over that and a fervent desire to come together and decide together we want to do everything we can to make this violence stop and using any authority that we have. You know, this is turning into a spat in Parliament, and it shouldn't be that, in my view. In terms of what's happened today, I don't know whether Lindsay Hoyle's change of the rules is a good thing or a bad thing necessarily. He's going to need to make his argument on that and convince MPs that he's done the right thing. And so far, I think it's just been a bit of a shock to Parliament. And indeed, he's done it in very controversial circumstances. But again, if you look at the 3 motions, yes, they're using different language. Yes, to some degree, they're saying different things. But they are all calling for an end to the violence. And it would seem to me it would be good if we could all unify around that.
Well, I thought it was interesting, David Lammy, I'll play a clip for you in a second, but David Lammy, he came under criticism yesterday. So let's remember yesterday at that point, it looked likely that perhaps the Labour amendment wouldn't get called. So he was asked a direct question about whether or not in that situation he would basically back the SNP amendment. I found it quite interesting. And again, this accusation of politicking over Palestine has been raised quite a lot. But let's have a listen to David Lammy.
I don't want to do anything in an election year in which the Labour Party might have the privilege of serving that cuts across our ability to do that. And if you look at the detail of that SNP motion, it's not balanced. And that is the problem as I see it with the SNP.
See, it's something that makes me quite uncomfortable about you're either passionate about an immediate ceasefire and protecting the lives of these children, or you're not. And you kind of lose me a little bit when you start saying, well, you've got to remember, we're in an election year and all the rest of it, because it shouldn't be about that. It shouldn't be about what's best for your re-election.
I think what David Lammy is saying, and I think he's quite right, actually, is he's saying, a few months from now, he may well be Foreign Secretary of this country, and he will be dealing directly with Israel and with the US and with the other players in this. Keir Starmer will be Prime Minister, assuming things go the way that it looks like they're going to go. They're going to have to deal with this. He's quite right to say he doesn't want to sign up to something that he's not going to be able to abide by when they're in a position of power, when they're negotiating with the states. And I think he is right to point to the SNP motion and say, well, on the one hand, yes, it's good that it's calling for a ceasefire, it's calling to an end to violence. What it doesn't do is strongly enough recognise that Israel has a right to defend itself, which it does, and recognise the violence that was perpetrated against Israelis only a few months ago.
Seems like electioneering to me. What do you think to it at home? I'm going to return to this topic. I mentioned the protests outside of Westminster. Patrick Christys is live, so we'll cross to him after the break and also continue this conversation and bring you into it too. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christys Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight are author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Sir Keir Starmer may have been saved from a major Gaza rebellion by the skin of his teeth thanks to the Speaker's decision to call Labour's amendment against the advice of the clerk. And we'll be talking about the perilous state of our armed forces, with missiles that don't go off and woke ideology infesting the Army, the Navy and the Air Force. Tune in at 8 o'clock.
Hi there, this is Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, till 7. The Conservative peer in the House of Lords and former MEP Jacqueline Foster and the journalist and commentator Mike Buckley alongside me. Of course, big night voting in Parliament today about whether or not there should be a ceasefire in Gaza. Our very own Patrick Christys is live outside of Westminster right now. Protests are occurring. What's going on, Patrick?
Yeah, well, an incredibly lively atmosphere, as you would expect, Michelle. So there's quite a lot happening. I'll talk you through it. There's a gathering here where there's a variety of different shouts, obviously, from Palestine, British Sunak's a waste man as well. If we turn around to the other side, if we possibly can, there's a stage there. Now, on that stage, we've had various different speakers. Jeremy Corbyn was talking. Now, Jeremy Corbyn made a very interesting point, actually, about why the Egyptian government are not opening that Rafah crossing and letting people in. He said that that would then be essentially a total evacuation of Gaza, and exactly what Israel wants. So he's standing in support of the Egyptians doing that. You can't see it from where I am now, but just the other side, by where the entrance, the back entrance, where MPs go into Parliament, there's been a gathering there. That's much, much smaller. We have had a van that's been going around as well, which I think is from the campaign against anti-Semitism, which is making points about Hamas and Palestinian jihad, etc. Heavy police presence. I mean, absolutely at the moment, this is pretty calm, really, certainly compared to some of the things that we've seen previously. It's worth noting as well, there is actually some confusion in the crowd here, and I think amongst journalists around the country, as to exactly what and when we are going to get inside the Houses of Parliament. It's kind of people's front of Judea territory, really, with the SNP demanding an immediate ceasefire, the government tabling an amendment for an immediate humanitarian pause, and then Labour calling for a ceasefire that lasts and lasts. So there we go. The biggest thing for me, though, speaking to people here, Michelle, I'll throw back to you in a second, is that Keir Starmer appears to be the big villain in all of this. People expected the Conservative Party to not necessarily go along the ceasefire route as they have done now, but they did expect more of Keir Starmer, and he's the person that a lot of people are talking about here, venting a lot of anger and a chant of Keir Starmer, what were you doing today? How many children have died today? It's been ringing around. So this is where we are, and as we can see, there's quite a lot of people. I don't know if maybe I could try and talk to this particular chap, but Lee, is that all right? Just to ask what you want from inside the House of Commons today, sir?
I want the SNP vote to go through.
You want the SNP vote to go through, OK. All right, and are you disappointed with what you've seen there? You want an immediate ceasefire now, I take it?
I don't like the way that the Speaker's changed the order. It's unprecedented, and he's made Labour go first, whereas the SNP put in the motion. So I don't know why he's done that, and I want an explanation.
Just some people are saying that it doesn't really matter what gets voted on today, because it's not going to impact what happens abroad. Because it's not necessarily going to impact what happens abroad. How would you respond?
Doesn't matter. It shows what the people want. Okay. That's what matters, and it shows a side to Biden and everyone else, and it shows the Palestinian people that we are not represented by our government, who are a racist and you know, look at all these people now, they're all angry.
And there are a lot of people. We'll just pan round as well. We'll just do a little bit of a walk through, I think, as well. As you can see, there's a heck of a lot of people all around here, and this crowd is growing by the hundreds and hundreds as more people finish work and gather here at Parliament Square, and it's going to spill over all the way round outside Parliament and all the way down past there. there as well. We're going to be covering it live. I'm going to be doing a couple of Vox Pops as well, so that'll be coming up live on my show, 9 to 11 p.m. tonight, Michelle.
Thanks ever so much for that, Patrick. We shall be watching your show at 9 o'clock. And that chap that you spoke to is going to have some fascinating pictures of the back of Patrick Christie's head, isn't he? He was taking loads of them. I'll have to inspect his hairline now. I wonder what's going on. Anyway, look, right, let's cut to the chase, because the technicalities of these amendments and the goings-on in Westminster and this amendment and that amendment, a lot of people don't really get it all, and a lot of people think it's not really relevant anyway. A lot of people, whoever they are, whichever side of the fence they are, what they want is for the killing of innocent children in Hamas to stop. Is that where you are as well?
Look, I think where the naivety comes into this, there are people calling for a ceasefire when you had a group of terrorists, a lot of them, on October the 7th, who went across the border into Israel and slaughtered, and I mean slaughtered, 1,400 people. It is a war crime. They took hostages, which is another war crime, and there are still about 130 of these hostages, and they're all civilians, men, women and children, babies, and they're still held hostage. Hamas don't want a ceasefire. They've been given an opportunity for a ceasefire. What they've also said is that this isn't going to be the first time they're going to do this. They have said in public, their organisation, that they will do it again and again. So they're not talking about actually stopping what took place again on October the 7th. Obviously, so Israel is still being attacked. There are still missiles being fired into Israel. Israel is also fighting on the northern border against Hezbollah, obviously from Lebanon. So Israel is still under attack. So we can all call for a ceasefire. Of course, everybody wants, jam tomorrow. But until they turn round, Hamas and these other terrorist organisations, and they say, we will release the hostages now and we will stop doing what we're doing, there is no prospect of moving this forward, no matter how many people stand outside and call for it. And that's where they are at the moment. They are belligerent and they are not moving at all. So, we're talking about aid coming in, which is very important. We know for a fact from the Panorama programme on Monday night, they're still siphoning off 30–40% of the aid, the humanitarian aid that's being allowed to get through to Gaza as well. So they use the women and the children as human shields. They're still doing it with their own people.
When you say you're referring to
I'm
Hamas,
talking about these terrorists, and they're still doing it, and they have no value on human life at all. They're very happy to use their own people to do this and further their ends, and their ends end up with destruction. We saw it with ISIS, and we've seen it with other groups, and it will continue.
So do you share that sentiment, then, that there should be no calls for a ceasefire until these Israeli hostages have been released?
No, of course I don't. I mean, we have to have a ceasefire, and it has to be as soon as possible. And the vast majority of the international community is of that view, including, crucially, now the United States and President Joe Biden, who is, the most influential person in all of this. So the United States have just this week put a motion before the UN Security Council saying that there should be an immediate ceasefire. Everybody wants the hostages released, of course, but we're now up to 30,000 deaths in Gaza, not of Hamas, but of innocent people.
Yeah, but that's not the US position.
It is the US position. They've put a motion into the UN saying that they want a humanitarian ceasefire.
The US position is that the hostages need to be released before anything moves forward. That is the US position.
That isn't what that motion says. The motion calls for a ceasefire. Everybody does want to get the hostages released, absolutely, but the US is now clear that there has to be a ceasefire and that Israel needs to not go into Rafah because that would cause, even more humanitarian civilian deaths.
I mean, there's also a question
most
about...
of the international community, as well as other, yes, of course Israel has the right to defend itself, but it has to be proportionate. Yeah, but we've gone way beyond a proportionate response at this point.
Yeah, but just look at this. There's 2 million Arab Israelis live in Israel. 1.6 million Palestinians live in Israel. These people are not fans of Hamas. They don't particularly want to see Hamas, I doubt, in the territory and in the country that they live in.
There's zero chance of Hamas. There is zero chance of Hamas getting out of Gaza
if you're listening to what their objective is.
At the time that the attacks happened in October, yes, that could happen, but it can't happen now.
The objective of Hamas is to basically destroy Israel, and that includes everybody that's there. And that includes, and will have an impact on, the 2 million Arab Israelis, 1.6 million Palestinians who live in Israel now.
But however many innocent Palestinians
be ruled
Israel
by
kills, that isn't
Hamas,
going to
which
end
is a
Hamas.
terrorist organisation. Nobody's talking about that, but it is a key issue here to what actually happens in the future.
I don't think anybody's denying that Hamas is a terrorist organisation, but indiscriminately killing thousands and thousands and thousands of Gazan women, children and men isn't going to stop Hamas being a terrorist organisation. It isn't going to stop what
Hamas need to stop firing missiles into Israel.
Well, Israel needs to stop killing innocent Gazans.
Hamas needs to turn around and say, we will release the hostages tomorrow. That's where your starting point is.
Well, Israel also holds thousands of Palestinians hostage.
They are prisoners. They are not hostages. They are prisoners. They've come under the rule of law in Israel, whether people agree with that or not.
They've never faced any criminal court.
Hostages. These were war crimes. These individuals and these civilians...
No one's denying that what Hamas did was a war crime.
Were not charged with anything. They were in bed, they were in their villages, they were at a music festival, and these terrorists went in and they slaughtered them, they raped them, and they took them hostage. There is a fundamental difference between what Israel is doing, or the prisoners it may have, and what this terrorist organisation did at the behest of Iran, because it's one of their proxies. Let's not stop, pussyfooting around.
Yes, the people in Israel were innocent, but the entire population of Gaza is not a member of Hamas.
To come in. Nobody invited them on October the 7th to come in and have a cup of tea. Everybody was minding their own business. Hamas broke the ceasefire that had been in place for some time.
And nobody invited Israel to go in and slaughter 30,000 Gazans either.
No, Israel has gone in as an army and has tried to target the areas. Hamas
Israel, in all likelihood, has broken international law as well.
You can't defend the indefensible. Hamas deliberately put headquarters and tunnels under schools and hospitals, and we know we've got all of the evidence. I have also seen the uncut footage of what Hamas terrorists did that day.
You're looking at two horrific acts of violence, and you're judging that one is perfectly fine and decent behaviour, and the other one is not.
Hamas knew
Neither of them
Israel
are remotely
would have to retaliate.
And I'm staggered that you can't see that.
I can see very clearly. I'm very staggered that you and many others can't see what happened by the fact that Hamas terrorists walked into a country that was literally minding its own business that day and thought it was going to be perfectly all right, with no repercussions, to do exactly what it did. And it's had time for 4 months to release these hostages, and it hasn't done it.
I don't think anybody is denying that Hamas is a terrorist organisation. What happened on October the 7th is completely horrific.
I'm not dwelling on that. We know it's a terrorist organisation.
That's
not the point I'm making.
You were just 60 seconds ago claiming that people were denying it.
You're trying to move out the point I'm making.
Regular viewers on my show will know that some people do deny that. So, for example, Michael Walker on Navarra Media, who's on this show, he comes on the show. On this show, he said he doesn't regard Hamas as a terrorist organisation. So, present day, people do still deny that.
And Jeremy a small minority. You've got members of the Labour Party who are still members of the Labour Party, and they're denying it too.
I don't think there's anybody. Well, certainly there are certainly no Labour MPs who are denying that.
Well, I have to tell you, they're doing it with great reluctance.
But the fact that Hamas is a terrorist organisation, or what happened on October 7th, is completely...
You don't have to keep saying that they're terror. We know that. What you're doing is moving away some of the points I'm raising as to why we're in this situation. I'm
simply making the point that there have been unacceptable acts on both sides and unacceptable deaths on both sides, but continuing the violence isn't going to make life better for anybody in Israel or in Gaza.
There have been avoidable deaths because of what happened in the first place. None of this...
What you seem to be arguing for is the continuing slaughter of women and children in Gaza, and I don't know why you're doing that.
No, don't do that, because that is absolutely an outrageous thing.
So what are you arguing for?
I am on the record as saying from the very beginning, it is the innocent women and children, Palestinian women and children, that Hamas and others hide behind. And they are using their own people as human shields. They are the disgrace. So don't think that people like me, because we are taking a particular position, are not aware of what's actually happening.
This conversation will continue in a second. I just want to be clear about this UN thing, because it has come up. So what happened was the UN Security Council, on Tuesday, there was a motion that was tabled by Algeria that called for immediate humanitarian ceasefire. The US actually vetoed that. The UK abstained. Then what happened was the US, they tabled their own motion, basically, which a draft resolution which called for a temporary ceasefire in Gaza as soon as is practicable. So that was the US's position. Now, there has been major developments in the goings-on in Parliament. Christopher Hope will join us in a couple of minutes to bring you up to speed with that. Don't go anywhere.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other pay-per-review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show. Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting, and that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions.
No.
We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. The Conservative peer in the House of Lords and a former MEP, Jacqueline Foster, is alongside me, as is a journalist and commentator, Mike Buckley. We've just been debating the goings-on in Parliament when it comes to the situation around the Gaza ceasefire votes. Well, I can tell you there's been some quite significant developments in that. Let's cross live to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who is live at Westminster to bring us all up to speed. What on earth is going on there?
Well, Michelle, unbelievably, and I think this hasn't happened before, certainly for my time covering politics, and Michelle, that's at least 20 years, and other wiser heads are saying longer than that, the government and the SNP have effectively picked up their own footballs and walked off the pitch. Labour are now, we think, voting on their own amendment unchallenged. This is because there's concern in the House about the way Speaker Lindsay Hoyle managed to allow Labour to amend what is an opposition day debate, shouldn't be allowed to be amended by a second opposition party. Big concerns, and this place has gone a bit febrile. Outside in the members' lobby, Tory MPs, SNP MPs are wandering around. In the voting lobbies right now, we think Labour's voting on their own. Extraordinary times. With me now is Brendan Clark-Smith, the former party deputy chairman. Brendan, what on earth just happened in the House of Commons?
Well, I mean, I've not seen anything like this before myself, and this is completely unprecedented, certainly in my time. A lot of very angry people here today. We were expecting an opposition day from the Scottish National Party. They feel that's been taken over now by the Labour Party. That's not what the procedure normally is. Normally, if you're a smaller party, of course, you get the chance to vote on your own opposition day, and then the government or another opposition party may try and amend that and say, well, we prefer another set of words. Otherwise, you'd never get to vote on your own thing. So procedurally, that's the way it's done. It's only twice, I think, in the last 25 years that there's been a slight change, and that's when the government hasn't tried to change it. So what happened with the Speaker this morning, we said again, is fairly unprecedented, and this is why everybody is so angry. So SNP and the Conservatives very much united here. The SNP walked out the chamber, we followed them straight after, so there's a bit of solidarity there, but this isn't right, and this isn't why we became members of Parliament.
And was Speaker Lindsay Hoyle in the chair when that happened, or was his deputy, Rosie Winterton?
Well, the Deputy Speaker was there, and this is the point. So a number of people raised points of order, said, where is the Speaker? We'd like him to explain his decision. Now, the Clerk of the House of Commons, he's given his reasons there. He said this is not something that goes with procedure normally. This is not the way it works. He gave his advice. He published that. I think if you read the letter, really the first paragraph and the last paragraph particularly are quite damning. Now, our concern is that there's been some pressure that's been exerted there. Maybe there's something a little bit more sinister, whether it's about the Speaker's position, whether he'd be removed after a general election or so on. And we feel that Labour have perhaps bullied their way through this, and that is the real concern. So a number of people raising points of order on the floor, say not just Conservatives, many of the SNP are there. They are truly outraged about this. So we want to know what's happened with this, and we think this sets a really, really bad precedent. So where we go from here, I don't know.
Well, both those claims are denied both by the Speaker's office and by the Labour Party of pressure brought to bear on the Speaker. But it is true, isn't it, that the Speaker is up, that job is up for grabs after the general election. What's his future now? Has he lost the confidence of the House of Commons?
Well, I think there's a lot of very angry people there, and those are questions that are going to have to be answered. You know, certainly in terms of the Speaker, someone I actually personally like and respect and so on, and then something like this comes along, and you have to say, this is not how we expect it. There were people chanting "Bring back Bercow" earlier, and I think it's
that's John Bercow, the Speaker during the Brexit wars when it was very controversial. His role was controversial.
Exactly, it's got to be pretty bad for that. And then, of course, what actually also happened tonight is the government, as you know, Penny Mordaunt announced this, that we were actually withdrawing our amendment. So what that meant is there was only the Labour and the SNP one left. So SNP quite rightly then asked, well, can we vote on ours first then? That's the normal way that the procedure goes. That would be basically how you would expect things to go. That would be fair, but there's been no change. So they asked whether the House could be suspended while that decision was made. No decision has been made, so they chose to walk out, and I completely respect that, and I support them with that as well.
Taking a step back, Brendan, this is politics in an election year. That's why this stuff happens. But there are people dying in Gaza. Israel's role is being scrutinised. Do you think this reflects badly on the House of Commons?
Yes, I think it does. I think as well it's about respecting the institution. We heard that a lot for various things over the last couple of years or so on. And this is the public are looking at this and they say, what on earth is actually going on here? So I was speaking to a couple of the SNP members on the way out, and we said we have quite different positions, really. I think we all want to see civilian deaths stop in. We'd all like to see some form of ceasefire. We disagree how to do that. We have actually almost polar opposite views on how that should be done tonight, which we were going to vote on. But we both agreed that actually we should be able to vote on this and we should do it properly. We shouldn't have these procedural arguments, and it's just turned into a political circus.
Could there be a vote, do you think, or a debate on the position of the Speaker in the House of Commons shortly?
That's possible. I know that EDM's been tabled. I know a lot of people have signed that. I think people deserve answers, certainly. That's why we asked for the House to be suspended, why we'd like the Speaker to come back and maybe explain the rationale behind some of those decisions. I know a lot of MPs have been getting abuse. There's a lot of thousands of people outside. We've been having marches, and we completely get that about MP safety. But what I'd also say is these opposition days, we've had them about sewage, we've had them about free school meals and so on.
EU referendum, by the way, back in the day, which I remember, very difficult for the governing party then.
Absolutely. I've had targeted attack ads on me saying that I've voted a certain way, and that's what opposition days are for. They're there to try and either trip up the government or trip up somebody else, and that's what you expect. But today there's been some serious sort of shifting around there, and I think this has caused some very serious problems, and I think it will go a lot further than just tonight's vote.
The lesson here for the Speaker, don't change the rules in Parliament, really, when it looks like it's helping one side, not the others.
Well, absolutely, and I think some people suggested there could be a number of front-bench resignations from Labour. I'd heard figures of around 80 or 90 people were looking at rebelling that. There's rumours that, Keir Starmer had said thank you for this earlier. He'll be breathing a sigh of relief when it was actually announced that the votes were going to be in the order that they were. It's probably a little nuanced at home, people thinking, what's all this about amendments and so on? It doesn't make sense to people on the door. doors. So I think what I'd say to them is that the process hasn't been followed properly. We believe that people have been cheated out of it, and this is completely wrong. There should be some accountability there.
Is it time for an apology from the Speaker to the House of Commons?
Well, we'll see. I think certainly an explanation, and that's what we wanted. We hear that he's back tomorrow. Perhaps he'll use that as an opportunity to do that.
Well, thank you, Brendan Clark-Smith there. Well, Brendan Clark-Smith there, trying to explain to viewers and listeners at home for GB News what on earth has happened in the House of Commons. For me, it's a straightforward lesson. Don't change the rules and look like you're favouring one side. It always goes wrong.
I've got to tell you, Christopher, whilst you were just talking there, I was scanning Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. I can tell you now, right, and I will be careful, I won't use any swear words, but people are absolutely furious. I mean, there's one guy here that says, I'm at the hospital at the moment seeing my dad. It would appear that there are more sensible people on this ward than in Westminster. What an embarrassment. No thoughts about what they're voting on, just the politics around it. I've seen it called a shambles, a pantomime. They're calling people basket cases. People really seem to be furious out there because whilst those guys where you are, they're very concerned about parliamentary procedure, this is politics. People are more concerned about the children that are getting killed and stopping that. Surely these kind of antics and this kind of behaviour and the focus of the MPs, like the one you've just been speaking to there about procedure, surely that just disconnects people more from politics, doesn't it?
Well, Michelle, you're right. Of course, you're right, and your viewer and listener in hospital, of course, yeah, of course, that is right. I mean, this essentially is Parliament having a debate about an international issue. Let's be honest here. The SNP pushed a vote using language which is going beyond the Labour position to try and force Labour MPs to either support that position and have to resign from the front bench, or not. The government wants to have its vote. Normally, only the government can amend an opposition motion, suck it up and deal with that debate, or whether they were going to, as you heard there from Brendan Clark-Smith, maybe 80 MPs may have rebelled. It would have caused problems for Keir Starmer. All of this is about the election. I mean, yes, it's about Gaza and Israel, but essentially, we're in an election year. Parties are trying to cause problems for other parties. A divisive issue, we know it from our email inboxes, is Gaza and Israel, and that is probably as much as addressing the issues, and it is a big issue. That's also why the SNP have phrased their motion in that way, to cause problems for other parties. It's an issue. These MPs do care about Gaza, they do care about Israel, but they also care about politics, and that's what you've seen tonight.
Yeah, Christopher Hope, I shall let you get back to things there, keep across it, and I'll come straight back to you should there be any further developments. But yeah, Christopher Hope there saying politicians do care about Gaza, they do care about Palestine, but they actually care more about getting re-elected.
I mean, I think where I certainly agree with you here. I think this has been an absolute appalling. I mean, I'm just astonished, actually, that we've actually got to this position in the House of Commons. And where we were in a sensible position, I believed, between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, which is obviously our official opposition, where we had stuck together all this time. And the fact that now Keir Starmer moved the goalposts over this last week, in my view, has led to this, because you couldn't have really put a cigarette paper between the government and the official opposition. And by moving his position, and in my view, by capitulating to some of these bullies and noisy people who are around who wanted to do this, I think he's made a grave, grave error. And I don't think he's fit to govern, frankly, in the way that he's behaved, because this has set this ball rolling. And notwithstanding the Speaker, obviously, in the House of Commons choosing to go against the normal protocols, which haven't helped, I mean, I just find it absolutely astonishing.
Mike?
I'm genuinely astonished that a member of the governing party would think it odd that the opposition would have a different opinion in the government. I mean, that's the opposition's job to have a different opinion.
We're talking about a serious issue.
I know we are. I also find it's an incredibly serious issue. There's no more serious issue in the world, possibly, other than Ukraine right now.
Gaza.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I'm just saying they're both important. Right. Gaza and Ukraine are important. But it's also completely understandable and normal. It would be odd if it didn't happen that Keir Starmer would change his view over a 4 or 5 month period. We're now, as we were saying before, we're now up to 30,000 deaths in Gaza. Of course, Keir Starmer's opinion is going to move, and of course, it's going to be more likely that he's going to come out and call more clearly as he has done, for a humanitarian ceasefire.
Hang on, come on though, Mike. Right, let's be serious for a second. Are you telling me that Keir Starmer is sitting there and looking at this death toll and genuinely changing his position, or do you think Keir Starmer is sitting there looking at, for example, the response of some of the Muslim voters, looking at his ratings, looking at what do I need to win, how many this, how many, and actually his position is changed not because of that situation there, but more because of how is that going to impact my success at the ballot box?
I'm not in Keir Starmer's head. I can't tell you why he's changed his position. But it would seem to me that Keir Starmer is not the only person who's changed his mind. For example, Joe Biden, President of the United States, he's been absolutely hand in glove with Israel throughout all of this. He has now got to the point where he's saying this has to stop. You cannot invade Rafah. There needs to be a ceasefire. But we do not vote. So Keir Starmer has only moved in the way that Joe Biden has moved.
We don't vote for Joe. We don't vote for Joe Biden.
I don't think it's credible.
Where Keir Starmer has lost the plot here, when we've ever been in a position historically over these years, whether it was Iraq, there was various conflicts that we've been involved in. The government in the official opposition will normally be hand in hand because we are then showing the position of the United Kingdom. And this, in my view, has the way Keir Starmer has acted over the last week or so has really, in my view, put them really right back on this.
I'm just going to show you, actually, if you're watching that moment, actually, because we're just discussing what's just gone on in Westminster. The SNP and the Tory MPs have walked out of the Commons. Let's look at that moment.
No. You will listen to the points of order. And listen politely. It looks so bad on such an important issue. And no point in shouting me down now. To our constituents, if they just see people who are raising perfectly reasonable points of order, that they're just shouted down. Not good. Not good. So, Chris Bryan.
There are perfectly legitimate views on different sides as to the propriety of today's proceedings. However, I would just say gently to some honourable members opposite who have said that you cannot possibly have an opposition day motion being amended by another opposition party, that some of the members who are shouting the loudest
I'm telling you, that is very unprecedented. Up they go. You will listen, she says. I don't think so. They certainly did not. I've got to say, many people have been in touch, deeply offended by one of the signs that one of the protesters was holding up when Patrick Christys was talking to them. Of course, we apologise for any offence caused. Look, for now, Mike Buckley, Jacqueline Foster, thank you for your time. Don't go anywhere. Nigel Farage will continue this conversation in a couple of minutes. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin. More wet and windy weather to come, particularly lively gusts tomorrow across parts of the south. We've seen plenty of rain today from this set of weather fronts. They are heading out into the North Sea, but more are following on behind, bringing showery rain to Northern Ireland and a good part of Scotland through this evening. Now, for most of England and Wales, much of the night will be dry and clear. Could turn a little misty, one or two fog patches in places, but look, more heavy rain returns by the time we get towards dawn. A mild night again across the south, but starting to turn a little colder further north. Cold enough for the showers in northern Scotland to fall as snow over the hills. It's rain, though, further south, giving us cause for concern. Heavy rain falling onto saturated ground could cause some flooding, so we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place, and then the wind's really whipping up just for a short period across the southeast through the day tomorrow. Could cause some damage, potential for some disruption as those gusts suddenly whip up for a time. So wet and windy across much of the south, particularly the southeast. Large parts of the country, it's a bright and blustery Thursday with sunny spells, but more showers coming into north.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news